The opposition has slammed the Morrison government's proposed Federal Corruption Commission as a watered-down iteration of what the Labor Party proposed earlier this year. The Shadow Attorney-General Mark Dreyfus says the government had been dragged kicking and screaming on the idea of a commission, although the proposal is flawed.
Well, of course we're pleased that there now seems to be a consensus in Canberra that we need a National Integrity Commission, but we're disappointed that the government has produced a model which has got limited scope, limited powers and no transparency, very disappointingly. We think that the Commission's got to have power to hold hearings in public. I think that it should most resemble the New South Wales ICAC, which has got hearings in public, which is able to self-start its inquiries. And I think that other examples, I don't want to single them out, but we've seen other state integrity commissions which have set the bar much too high. And that's an error that the Morrison government seems to be falling into. They want to set the bar very high indeed. They want the commission only to be able to look at matters where there's, as they put it, a reasonable suspicion of criminal conduct. That's too high. They want it only to be in relation to criminal conduct. That's too high. They don't want it to be able to self-start. That's not enough power. And as I said, there's a limit that they want to put on public hearings, and I don't think that's appropriate. We want to see a concerted effort against corruption everywhere in public life in Australia. We think we need to rebuild confidence.
Mark Dreyfus there. And Jeffrey Watson, SC, is a barrister who's worked with the New South Wales Independent Commission Against Corruption. He's welcomed the government's agreement to create a body, but he says the current proposal is a step backwards.
For a long time I've been urging the creation of a Federal Integrity Commission. So in general terms I say, oh great, they've finally come on board with the crossbench and the Labor Party and the Greens to create such a body. It's, in general, a great idea.
But when we go to the specifics, there are going to be no public hearings into the public sector side of things. How important are public hearings in an anti-corruption body? Well,
I said in general it's a great idea. The way in which the government is modelling this proposed commission, it's a disaster. It's worse than having no commission, in my opinion. When you talk about public hearings, picture for yourself what would have happened if the recent Banking Royal Commission had been held in secret. It would have done no good at all. What about the Royal Commission into Institutional Child Abuse? If that had been conducted in secrecy, it would have been, as it were, an extension of the original problem, the original secrecy. You need transparency. The public hearings are a key factor in exposing corruption and deterring future corruption.
Another element of this, it will not be retrospective. What do you think of that?
Oh, I think that's actually, I was about to say I think that's silly. Actually, it's silly like a fox might be silly. If you think about it, we've got a government, they look like they might be on their last legs, and they're going to try and create an anti-corruption body and say, but hold on, it starts today and you can't look at anything that we did over the last 5 years, really. I mean, think for yourself what that means.
Another element that's come in for criticism is the definition of corruption. This body is going to investigate serious criminal conduct. Is that what do you think of that definition of corruption in the public sector?
Well, I think it's far too narrow. It would probably eliminate most of the good work that an anti-corruption body can do. It's also completely out of kilter with the definitions adopted by any of the international agencies who do this work. Why are they picking a definition which is contrary to international thinking on the issue? It's far too narrow.
So how will that hamstring investigations?
Well, let me couple it with this. Before the Commission could start an investigation, it has to have a reasonable suspicion that there has been a criminal offence of the character of which you just spoke, Joe. The point is this, is that you can't have a reasonable suspicion without doing some investigation. It would fall at the first hurdle. No investigations would get off the ground. Let me give you an example. I went through my mind, and I did a lot of work, not only at ICAC but at the Police Integrity Commission. Lots of inquiries, most of which didn't become public. Not one of those investigations would have been allowed to commence under this proposal. Just think about this. The tip-off that ICAC got, which led to the discovery that Eddie Obeid had, in effect, planned to create a mining licence over a family farming property. That was an anonymous tip-off. Under this proposal by the federal government, that investigation could not commence.
In that media conference yesterday, the New South Wales ICAC came in for a lot of criticism. That it was basically held up as an example of how not to do things. Words like kangaroo court were used to do playthings of usual actors. How did that make you feel after the work that you've done over the years?
More deeply sceptical of the Liberal Party than I was at the end of that work. You've got to remember this. When we started those famous inquiries, they were against the Labor Party, they were against Mr Obeid and his group, and the great cheer squad in the corner of the room was the New South Wales Liberal Party. Well, that changed one day. It changed because ICAC then, in doing what it does, started looking at the Liberal Party. No, you can't look here, they said, and all of a sudden the same place became a kangaroo court. I heard that and I just thought, this is disappointing, and it shows an inability to learn. The Liberal Party should be ecstatic that ICAC was able to expose and drive certain elements in the Liberal Party out of politics. Instead, now they wish to hurl abuse at it.
What about the criticism of the New South Wales ICAC that people have lost their careers because of untested assertions at ICAC?
I know that's said, but that is quite factually inaccurate. Untested. All of the evidence is presented. The people are legally represented. It is presented as it is presented at a Royal Commission. What is the difference? If it was good enough for the same government that's now saying you can't have retrospectivity, you can't have open hearings, what's changed since they appointed the Trade Unions Royal Commission?
But what about untested as opposed to proven?
Well, this is where there's this loose terminology, and it's a wrong impression. It looks like you've gained the wrong impression from what they keep saying. It's not true. It is tested. It's in an open forum. The public can see whether or not the facts are proved. But it's not a criminal court. If you want to go onto a criminal court, all of the old protections which are in place to make certain that convictions are safe and sound, they are resumed, and the criminal courts do their work quite separately to a Royal Commission or to an ICAC or to an Integrity Commission.
So as someone who's done a lot of work in this area over the years and very keenly put the case for a Federal Integrity Commission or anti-corruption body, how do you feel now at this stage that the federal government has put this forward? Do you feel that this model will actually get up, or do you think this has got no chance of getting up?
I sincerely hope that this model will be rejected in the House. It will be rejected by the Labor Party, the Greens and the crossbenchers. The crossbenchers in particular and the Greens have been very strongly in favour of a much stronger model than this. I don't think they'll put up with it. And I think you might find that in the Senate as well. I've got to say this. I started by saying I think that this could be counterproductive. I don't like the idea of some really very poor model being put up and presented. You'll find, next thing, the politicians will get up in Parliament when there's some question over their doings and they'll say, but the Commonwealth Integrity Commission hasn't spoken out against it. Well, of course, it's just absurd. It can't. It's got to keep its doings, its workings in secret. So what you might do is you'll find, I think, the politicians will start using this as a technique of covering up for things that they've done. It's a negative move, not a positive move.
Jeffrey Watson there.